Drugs like meth plague our streets. More than 250 pounds seized in Omaha last year. Most of it comes from Mexico. The battle to stop the flow of meth in our country is constant. In this series, we'll take you to the southwest border with Mexico, and you'll see the enormity of this fight from the front lines.
As you can see, it's sometimes a messy job.
Two unlikely friends. Josh is from California. Tyler from Omaha. Struggle is what brought these two together.
It's like the little brother I never wanted.
A struggle with addiction, for Josh, heroin.
I started around 28. I got injured at work, got prescribed Vicodin, and then that snowballed into Oxycontin into heroin.
Tyler, cocaine.
It's a nightmare, because you're fine 1 second, and then next thing you know, you lose everything. Like, I've burnt so many bridges with my family and my friends.
Their journey into drugs is all too common in our world. Fentanyl, meth, opioids plague the Midwest.
To give you put it in perspective, last year we seized, just the DEA here in Omaha seized 250 pounds of meth, which is a lot of methamphetamine for this region. Years prior, we seized 80 pounds.
Omaha is a ripe target.
If you look at the geography of, let's say, Omaha, you have I-29 running north and south, and I-80 running, major pipeline running east and west. Omaha sits right at the crosshairs of those two interstates.
A spider web of dealers, transporters, a drug pipeline that spans thousands of miles, and most is traced back to Mexico. The vast U.S. border is the battlefield. 3 News Now investigators traveled to the San Diego sector of the border. From a bird's eye view,
you'll see the terrain start to rise.
To ocean.
It is a cat and mouse game.
To land.
Let's go. We have a high rate of seizures and violations that our officers are trained to detect.
And experience what it's like protecting our southern border.
We've been discovering tunnels since the early 90s.
Deck secured?
Yep.
Thank you.
We begin our journey at the mouth of San Diego Bay.
Just looking ahead, there's probably a good 50+ boats, and it's a Monday afternoon.
Riding with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They're responsible for protecting 931 miles of California coastline and a short boat ride away from Mexico.
If it was a nice clear day, we'd see Tijuana. It's just over 7 miles.
Here, any boat can be suspect, from drugs to human trafficking.
This last fiscal year, we had the largest number of seizures in several fiscal years.
Crews like this patrol in fast boats.
Because oftentimes, we're in a tail chase, or we have to play catch up. We work off of intelligence. We work off our aircraft spotting targets that are most oftentimes far offshore.
Here you can see one such chase. Boats and aircraft chase this drug boat, eventually catching up and snagging the smugglers. But a lot of it gets through.
They go as far out as 200 nautical miles. A large panga style, it's an open platform Mexican fishing vessel, which is very capable of high speed, 40+ knots, and carrying upwards of 3,000 pounds total, to include cargo, whether it's people, it's narcotics, and or fuel. And they'll take enough fuel with them to go up to San Francisco.
The cartels are always using very interesting tactics. One of them is to use fast, swift boats to come up onto a beach like this, then quickly run to a waiting car.
So oftentimes our beaches are littered with these smuggling vessels because it's not worth it for the smugglers to try to recover a beach landing and go back out to sea and then back to Mexico.
Sometimes it's an impossible task. Drug cartels use spotters at the mouth of the bay, high up in an area like Point Loma. Watching the movement of law enforcement and smugglers can be anyone. It's not obvious.
There are several instances where the smugglers hire American citizens, United States citizens, to sit on top of the boat to try to make us think that it's just a mom and pop, or they could use kids on board.
The seizures can be massive. In 2019, more than 284,000 pounds of cocaine, nearly 102,000 in marijuana, 51,000 pounds of meth. It's hard to really get a sense of the vastness of the area they cover. You feel like a needle in a haystack. So much to cover. And it's not just these boats. You have helicopters overhead, fixed-wing aircraft, all working together to keep this sector safe and to continue the cat and mouse game.
And their job is to circumvent us, to deliver their product, whether it's humans or some type of cargo like narcotics, and it's our job to identify them.
Tomorrow, we take you to the busiest port of entry in the Western Hemisphere, where thousands of cars and trucks and semis cross every single day, and how border agents have to be able to find a needle in a haystack. Jeff Van Sant, 3 News Now. The southwest border is home to the busiest port of entry in the Western Hemisphere. Thousands of cars, trucks, semi-trucks cross every single day, and the drug cartels try every which way to get their product in. Border agents face a daunting task of trying to find it. You're getting a bird's-eye view of the vast southwest border. From the scorching heat of the desert in Arizona to mountainous, rugged terrain, to the picturesque California coast. In the San Diego area, you can see countless buildings, warehouses, and housing on either side of the border. The U.S. Border Patrol says it's perfect cover for smuggling drugs.
The cartels it seems like they have an endless supply of money, and they have nothing but time, and they come up with some really innovative ways to smuggle their product into the country.
San Ysidro Port of Entry is our largest vehicle crossing in the U.S.
Each day, more than 70,000 cars and 20,000 people on foot cross from Tijuana into San Diego. It's one of the largest ports of entry in the Western Hemisphere. With that kind of volume, agents use their instincts, their training, to pick out anything suspicious.
Well, first of all, their itinerary. What are they doing in Mexico, where they're going, those kind of questions. And that kind of prompts their behavior. Sometimes there are nervous signs. People are typically nervous when crossing the border, so you got to be able to get past that regular nervousness and find out if there's more to it.
Vehicles carrying drugs or smuggling people look like everyone else, and each day they try to cross into the U.S.
This is a 2008 Jeep Wrangler that was seized this past Friday. This Wrangler was containing 13 pounds of methamphetamine.
Drugs can be stashed anywhere, inside the dash, in the seats, the engine, the tires.
As we go back, we're looking at the rear panels, we're looking at the tires as well. And then in this case, this compartment and this concealment was in the rear quarter panels with access through the rear lights. So this rear light, our officers had to look for signs, of tampering, removed it, and then we saw the packages.
Even with people, they can be found hidden in all sorts of compartments. Today, we see a car brought in for inspection. 2 people trying to illegally cross are found in the trunk.
They are taken inside along with the driver. The driver gets further inspected. We do a personal search of their person. And the undocumented aliens that are trying to come in without the proper entry documents, they become material witnesses to the smuggling event. So we hold them, we interview them.
This entry is just part of it. Mexico is the second largest exporter to the United States behind China. Hundreds of billions of dollars every year. A lot of goods come through a port like this.
We average approximately 3,500 to 3,600 trucks a day. We do take down a lot of narcotic seizures, mostly marijuana here. And when we do get one, it is a huge load. For the most part, they use a truck and trailer, so they're able to get in thousands of pounds at a time.
A daunting task, 3,600 tractor trailers. Agents can't inspect them all.
We have to utilize our targeting skills in advance. We require all the importers to file their entries 1 hour in advance. Gives us an opportunity to review the paperwork, review the commodities, see if there's any uncommon anomalies there.
Fiscal year 2020 saw a growth in seizures according to the Border Patrol. 68,000 pounds of meth in 2019. This year, 141,000 pounds.
76, 77.
Marijuana still a big exporter, 313,000 pounds this year, over 3,000 pounds of fentanyl. It's an ongoing struggle, one these agents try to combat every day. The battle is never ending. As long as there's a demand, there's a supply.
We have such a bad drug problem in this country that we're keeping the cartels and other drug trafficking organizations in business.
In part 3 of our series, The War on Drugs from the Border to Omaha, we get a first-hand look at the new border wall and how the cartels have perfected the art of digging tunnels, creating a direct pipeline into the United States. I'm Jeff Van Sant, 3 News Now. The southwest border is a hotbed of drug smuggling, from the ports of entry to sophisticated tunnels built by the cartels to defeat the border wall. Every day brings something new from the cartels, and agents continue the uphill battle of trying to stop them. This is the San Diego sector of the southern border. On the other side, Tijuana. Border Patrol says this area has a history of violence going back decades.
A lot of this area was extremely dangerous to patrol. A lot of assaults, a lot of agents were getting injured patrolling this area.
The Sinaloa cartel works this sector. Its boss, Joaquin Guzman, better known as El Chapo, was arrested in 2016 and is serving a life sentence in the United States. The cartel is the most powerful and violent drug organization in Mexico.
People to say that it's not a war, I would beg those people to get on the internet and search what's going on in Mexico. We're talking tens of thousands of people are dying every year from cartel violence. If that's not a war, I don't know what is.
The cartel is the largest smugglers of drugs into the U.S., drugs that will eventually make their way to Omaha.
We've been discovering tunnels, trying to beat our infrastructure since the early 90s. And just recently here in San Diego, we discovered the world's longest tunnel that was most likely used for narcotic smuggling.
Tunnels like this have been discovered in this sector of the border. Some are sophisticated networks defeating the border wall by going underneath.
The cartels it seems like they have an endless supply of money, and they have nothing but time, and they come up with some really innovative ways to smuggle their product into the country.
The tunnels pop out on the U.S. side, in most cases into a warehouse, and there's a lot around here.
This area is also known where a lot of tunnels are discovered. They're able to blend in with the local traffic and a lot of the warehouse buildings, and a lot of the intel that we gather is just from people seeing stuff, if something's out of place, normally, see something, say something.
In our visit in February, we're shown the new border wall.
You'll notice on the south side, bordering Mexico, we have an 18-foot steel bollard fence with 5-foot anti-climb plate. We have about roughly 150 foot of an enforcement zone, but then throughout here we also have stadium style lighting and we have remote video surveillance. And then we also, on the north side, we have the 30-foot steel bollard style fence.
A cornerstone of President Trump's push to increase security along the southern border. The San Diego sector includes 14 miles of new fencing. Just to give you the idea of the scope and pace of this operation, all this behind me, about 2.5 miles, wasn't here just a year ago. When we visited in February, construction was still underway. It was completed this summer. Its cost around $153 million. The San Diego sector is the most fortified across the southern border.
This wall system, the border infrastructure system, gives me time. So that's one of the issues. When you don't have any infrastructure, individuals could drive straight across the border, they could run straight across the border, they could pass drugs and other weapons or anything you can imagine.
It replaces decades-old fencing.
This kind of shows how the infrastructure has changed throughout the years. This right here, they doubled up during the construction time, but this was really only about 6 to 8 feet. This is the corrugated steel they were talking about, the old Vietnam-style landing mat.
Agents say smugglers use basic power tools to defeat it.
We got all these ends, like all these upside-down U's cut. That was all from power tools. They would come, they wait for the fog to roll in, and they would make these cuts, and then when border agents aren't around, drugs and illegal traffic would go through.
While the new wall does provide more of an obstacle to smugglers, the California Border Patrol says there was at least 18 breaches or attempted breaches in a single month last year. Agents say with the new wall brings interesting new tactics.
Maybe a 16-year-old kid was using a remote control RC car to drive drugs across, and they were loading into a duffel bag.
Whether it's going through a tunnel, coming across in a vehicle, crossing in a backpack, flying it through, little hang gliders. Now they're using drones. I mean, there is no end to their imaginative skills.
It's a cat and mouse game, changing constantly. No matter how hard the fight to stop the drugs, the flow of dangerous narcotics continues, plaguing communities across the country.
There's a lot of land to cover and a lot of different ways that drugs are coming in, and we simply just can't stop it.
From the southern border, it gets dispersed across the country and here in the Midwest.
To give you put it in perspective, last year we seized, just the DEA here in Omaha seized 250 pounds of meth, which is a lot of methamphetamine for this region. Years prior, we seized 80 pounds.
A problem that just won't go away.
The only way we win this is we got to have people stop wanting it.
In our next segment, we go from the border to Omaha. We examine the impact the drug war has on our city and our state and the toll it has taken on so many lives. Jeff Van Sant, 3 News Now. In the early 1990s and early 2000s, meth was king here in the Midwest, especially in small farming communities where needed chemicals were easy to come by. But then production moved to Mexico after a massive crackdown by authorities here in the U.S. The result, cheaper and more potent meth on our streets.
Omaha 18 from pad 6 for runway 36, making beta departure 130.15, good for takeoff.
3 News Now has taken you on a journey to the southwest border with Mexico. Looking at the drug war, the fight against smugglers bringing in untold amounts of meth, cocaine, marijuana to our streets.
We're talking tens of thousands of people are dying every year from cartel violence. If that's not a war, I don't know what is.
That war is raging across the United States.
Get out in the hallway right now!
And right here in Omaha, like so many other cities, drugs have their victims.
It's a nightmare. Because, you're fine 1 second, and then next thing you know, you lose everything. Like, I've burnt so many bridges with my family and, my friends.
Tyler got addicted to cocaine.
The first time I took it, it was, I got sick. And then, I wanted that rush, And so I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it.
His entire life has been affected by drugs. He suffers from cerebral palsy and scoliosis. His mother was a drug addict.
When I was younger, like in my early teens, I was always in that why me aspect. Like what did I do to deserve this?
Because we used to get them from Pettit's Pastry a lot when I was a kid.
He lives at Open Door Mission, trying to turn his life around, just like his friend Joshua. He's originally from California. He started out on prescription pills, then moved to heroin.
At first, it was bliss. It was a good thing, because it was cheaper than pills, and it kept me going on an everyday basis. But within such a short period of time, I lost everything. Lost all my friends, my family, lost my sense of credibility. Just everything.
His addiction is what brought him here to the Midwest. He got caught trying to smuggle meth from California into this area.
Selling drugs to get by, just to support a habit. Never really made much off it other than just enough drugs to get high and get the next batch.
Drugs like meth have been around since the 90s. Small communities in Nebraska like Beatrice were hit hard.
One of the things we were seeing was high school kids, young adults who otherwise hadn't been in the drug world would suddenly experimenting with meth and getting methamphetamines and getting addicted.
Small communities like Beatrice were perfect breeding grounds for meth labs.
Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, domestic production of methamphetamine was a huge problem, especially here in the Midwest. You have all the farming communities.
One of the things we found was it was everywhere. And we literally could put out as many investigators as we could afford and buy as much meth from drug dealers as we could, because it was everywhere.
Beatrice Police Chief Bruce Lang led the fight against meth in his town. Eventually, drug enforcement got tougher across the U.S. Production tapered off in the 2000s, but not without consequences.
The Midwest was dealing with 7,000 to 8,000 small toxic labs a year, to now the mega labs that are going down in Mexico that are producing thousands of kilos, developing a higher, purer, more potent product than any domestic lab here could have ever fathomed producing. I have 453 dosage units out of this right here.
Stopping the flow is never ending.
You kind of put it in perspective. Last year we seized, just the DEA here in Omaha seized 250 pounds of meth, which is a lot of methamphetamine for this region. Years prior, we seized 80 pounds. If you look at the geography of, let's say, Omaha, you have I-29 running north and south, and I-80 running, major pipeline running east and west. Omaha sits right at the crosshairs of those two interstates.
On any given day, Interstate 80 here is a pipeline for criminal activity. We've seen 20-year-old college students that are trying to make a little extra cash. We've also seen the 75-year-old retired couple that they're very good at it because they're not the type that you would suspect of being involved in that type of thing.
While the drug war rages, so does the fight to help addicts. That brings us back to Tyler.
If I don't have something to do, I'll go nuts.
And Joshua.
The little brother I never wanted.
That's my bodyguard.
They're trying to return to normal life, helped by those around them at Open Door Mission.
I'm pretty positive that I'm going to be able to stay with it this time. I mean, for me, like I've been wanting to get clean for 3 or 4 years now, if not longer. It's just the sickness, it's getting over that. And now that I'm over it, it's time to just, stick with it, stay clean.
I have the greatest group of friends, and I'm so glad I'm here. I've actually decided to stay here because they have apartments upstairs you can rent, so I've decided to stay here and, continue to use the support system that I've built up.
Two guys who are survivors. They're reconnecting with family and friends, rebuilding their lives. As for the drug war, it's never ending. Law enforcement are doing their part, but say continued education in our schools or parents teaching their kids about the dangers of drugs are great tools in the arsenal. But at the end of the day, the United States has a nasty habit, an insatiable appetite for drugs.
The only way we win this is we got to have people stop wanting it.
According to the CDC, since 1999, more than 750,000 people have died from a drug overdose. Jeff Van Sant, 3 News Now.